And that really takes me on to what I'm going to be focusing on with my opening address. It is the broadening of that conversation. We're at a time of change. Now, we can always say that, but the heat feels particularly sharp right now. There are demands on global process owners, shared services organisations, GBS, that we haven't necessarily felt before. We are, ladies and gentlemen, many of us being stress tested. And that is making our kind of focus on enablers, digital enablers, particularly relevant. A lot of these technologies, of course, have been around for years. Your more traditional enabling technologies, RPA indeed, of course, our ERP, but they are very relevant now because our need for them to almost survive in our current climate is very great. So let's just focus a little bit on what we are currently experiencing and why. So I'm going to kind of focus on the why first. There is a digital transformation happening right now. We're not going to be overlooking the importance of focus on process that sits underneath that and the relevance of that. But there is this need for digital transformation because that can take us to a whole new level as far as our delivery is concerned. And the focus on that is caused by these drivers. I've articulated a handful. I won't have captured all of them, but most of them will resonate with you. Business growth. Now, there are, of course, a few industries that are going through consolidation, but for the majority of companies in this room, you are experiencing some kind of business growth right now. And this is putting more pressure on your shared services and GBS organisation. The number of transactions within scope for you is expanding. You are expected to go into new territories. M&A activity means you are folding in new organisations and having to migrate new businesses as well. So this is putting pressure on you as a global process owner. Secondly, increased competition. Because of this expansion, because companies are indeed digging into every corner of the world, really, a lot of enterprise organisations which you represent, billion-plus turnover organisations, you're digging into these corners of the world, and you're finding new competitors. So your margins are being squeezed. There's more pressure on you to continue to deliver excellent service, but at a lower cost. And a lot of that competition is coming from a new flavour of organisations that have disruptive models, companies that are born in the cloud, they're digitally native. The way that they operate their business is very, very different to the way that traditional organisations run their businesses, and traditional organisations are being challenged by this. And this is, of course, introducing another demand. Business expectations are heightening because we, as consumers, deal with disruptive technologies in the evening, in the daytime, in the weekends. As consumers, we want things quickly, inexpensively. We want things accurately. And these are just your standard consumer expectations now. So business expectations are going up. Because many of you have been running shared services and GBS now for 20 years, 15 years, 10 years, along that journey, you've always been expected every year to deliver more cost savings. And unfortunately, that conversation doesn't go away. So every year, you're expected to deliver cost reduction. So on top of that, you're expected to have happier customers than last year. And they have higher standards. They have less patience than they had because of this awareness and this usage of new technology that's coming into our worlds. You're expected to have an excellent product, service quality, fiscal compliance. You're expected within your GBS to have inspiring, innovative, and capable leadership. And you're expected to be providing improved operational agility to help your organisation indeed be competitive. You're supposed to be providing data and intelligence that can help enhance decision-making capabilities. That's an awful lot of expectations. But everyone in this room, I imagine, has expectations that are represented within this list, maybe the whole gamut. On top of that, your customer interaction. I'm not talking about, obviously, your external customers. I'm talking about your internal customers. And now the design thinking approach that needs to go behind understanding the customer experience, the customer journey. So this is a whole new world that's coming into shared services, global business services, and how the GPO is thinking about bringing people online to their processes. Customer segmentation. dealing with everybody in a unique, individualized way. And we've got the multi-channel engagement there as well, helping and aiding with education and awareness within your organization. So this means that there is a key requirement now, because this slide of key drivers wouldn't have flashed up like this when we started doing the GPO events in 2014. This is very heightened and enhanced now. So it's making us look to solutions in a very sharpened way. And that's driving our need for digital enablers. So many of us have gone mobile. We've moved to the cloud as much as we can, but there's still a way to go. And cloud relating to, namely, your ERP environment. We are looking to use social as much as possible. Many of us are on the RPA journey. Again, a technology that's been around for a while, but it's only really in the last 3 years where I feel like these drivers have really started to kind of kick in. RPA has become very, very meaningful, and again, I keep referring to that word, relevant to global process owners and GBS environments. And looking forward to what artificial intelligence, potentially blockchain, big data, and really understanding big data and what it can do for you to offer those insights can bring into your GPO offering. So if we boil it down, what is the difference between taking advantage of all of this and embracing this versus not? And I think a good representation of the gulf between companies that adopt this approach, have a firm digital strategy, and again, not overlooking the process standardization that needs to exist underneath that, and those that don't. I think it's good to have a look at these statistics because they are rather alarming, and I don't want to kind of spook people in this room, but these are interesting statistics. Now, according to Hackett, when you compare the financial results of the top 5 digitally native companies versus the top 5 traditional non-digitally native companies, these are the stats that you're looking at. So top 5 traditional, top 5 digital in the world. Revenue increased by 87% for the digitally native companies between 2012 and 2017 versus 11% for the traditional. So we're talking the top 5 traditional here. Net profit for the digital increased 48% versus 11%. And market cap increased by 142% for the companies that were born in the cloud, those top 5 versus 45% for the traditional ones. These statistics speak volumes, so it puts immense pressure, especially on those organizations that have more of the traditional model, to be evaluating what their digital strategy is. And what does this mean for the global process owner? Global process owner is, without doubt, pivotal in this digital strategy and making sure that not only that you keep up with your competition, but you stay ahead, and you stay ahead as much as you can of these drivers. Global process owners are focusing, as you will be, on making sure that your process is optimal and supporting your company's strategic objectives as tightly as possible. So knowing what those strategic objectives are, they will change, maybe every 6 months, every 12 months, but knowing what they are and making sure that you've got agility within your strategy to stay very much in lockstep with that overarching corporate strategy. And this usually means understanding what your as-is situation is and what your will-be process will look like, and focusing on how it will be standardized, it will be controlled, it will be offer visibility, it will be cost-effective, it will be simplified, it will be automated, it will be scalable and legally compliant. Another focus for you to have in mind in order to drive out the waste within your organization by doing all these things above, we talked about the standardizing, the controlling, the simplification, the automation, to drive out the waste. And a statistic that I've got here from Celonis is that because of failure to find and eliminate inefficiencies within process for the Fortune 200 companies, they are losing $237 billion a year. So that's just over $1 billion a year that each of these Fortune 200, so these are the good ones, right? They're losing just over $1 billion a year because of waste within their process. What does this mean for the GPO? I boiled this down, and I've mentioned this before, and this is again after 4.5, nearly 5 years of running these events. These are the words that keep coming through again and again. It's almost like the GPO's mantra. I term it as the GPO's mandate, to be able to simplify, eliminate, standardize, and automate. So simplify, eliminate, standardize, and automate. These seem to be the 4 pillars that can drive change within an organization. And GPOs must be supported. You must be supported in order to successfully drive this mandate. I'm now going to touch on 8 points that will help you as global process owners feel more supported and be more supported. I've termed them as 8 mistakes to avoid. You can also reframe that and focus on kind of best practices to apply in order to make sure that you are best supported to deliver your outcomes. So the first mistake is failing to structure project management resource adequately. When we started these events, I think there was a kind of a common understanding or a common perspective that GPO sat in an ivory tower, maybe slightly distant and isolated from the business, didn't really understand the execution part. That's gone. That doesn't count anymore. The GPO doesn't work alone. However, there are not always global process owners out there that are tightly connected with project resource. And it's come up again and again that project resource and that link to having some kind of connection, responsibility, accountability between the global process owner and the project resource is key. Because you come up with a design and then it's absolutely instrumental to your success, to your global process, to see that that moves into project deployment, implementation, and then is just operationalized. 3 stats on this. 13% of people in this room, this data is actually taken from our pre-conference study survey that we ran with you, so thank you for participating in that. 13% of global process owners who participated in that study would like a simpler project approval process. Now, this is actually quite a small number because it means that 87% of you are actually quite comfortable with the governance, we call it governance, around your approval, project approval process. And this is something that's been coming up again and again over the last few years about having that tight governance and making sure that you are on the committee and that projects that get chosen and deployed, you are instrumental in the approval of that. 24% of you would like project delivery resource reporting into you. So we have a number of speakers that have that privilege, and it does seem to be making a difference. So we're going to be touching on that today and tomorrow. And 26% of you would like project delivery teams sitting within your process tower. So having that expertise, understanding what the process is, it helps if they're actually sitting within the process tower itself. The second mistake is not having the strongest relationship with IT. So we're improving that relationship, that bond between global process ownership and the global process owners and IT is critical. 24% of the group said that they would benefit from a better, more formal relationship with IT. This is so important, and I know that a lot of organisations have spent a great deal of time working specifically on this. It's so important because for most of you in the room, your scope from a process perspective is the same scope that's represented by your key ERP. So many of you, if you work in an SAP environment, if 70% of your company is on SAP, chances are 70% of your processes are within your scope. The other 30% might not be in your scope yet, but maybe that's something to fold in. So there's such a connection between the ERP, the scope of the ERP, the processes on an ERP, and your universe, your scope. ERPs, thought this was an interesting stat. The large ERPs that we're talking about here, SAP, Oracle, the ones that have had decades now of influence within the world of shared services, continue to be incredibly dominant within our world. 89% of you operate off SAP or Oracle. We're being quite generous to Oracle within that stat there because it's SAP that absolutely without doubt holds the lion's share at 79%. Increasingly dominant year on year, certainly within Europe. So coming back about having this good relationship with IT, we wanted to find out to what degree are you driving, as a global process owner, are you driving your digital strategy, focusing on your ERP, but more specifically on enabling technologies, an RPA, on artificial intelligence. How much are you involved in that, or are you driving it? 11% of you said yes, we're driving it. 38% said yes, we're involved in it. 44% said no, but this is something that we are looking to be part of. And 7% of you said, no, we do not have any plans in place to build a cohesive strategy right now. So maybe this is because the digital strategy is involving a wider part of the organisation, but at the very least, we should have a high representation of yellow there, where global process owners are involved in that. And the reason being, connected to mistake number 3, is because for you to have success within your process area, you can only go so far without technology. And we know that. Mistake number 3 is GPOs having no or little say over technology decisions that affect their process area. 28% of the group said they would be more successful if they had greater ownership over technology decisions that affect their process area. So let's just have a look at how automated the group is today. So this is a busy slide, so hopefully I'll just help you zero in on the pieces that are relevant. We asked how automated your processes are today. So working around the pie, the small numbers at the top, really, it's kind of the threes, 2 3s. Yes, we have over 80% of the transactions globally automated and straight through. The yellow one, over 80% of the transactions globally are automated, not straight through, but automated. And then the green pie, 50% to 79% of transactions globally are automated. So we've got a segment there, 24%, are saying that they have over 50% of their transactions automated globally, which leaves 76% operating in environments where less than 50% of transactions are indeed automated. So you need to have a standardized process as much as you can, not exclusively, but as much as you can to move to those levels of automation. So let's have a look at how standardized your processes are. How ready is your process for RPA, i.e., how standardized is it? 2% say very standardized, 35% say mostly standardized, but a significant 52% say we're not really standardized, we're not really ready yet. And 11% say definitely not ready. Okay, so how does that link with the deployment of RPA across your processes? Do you have an RPA program in place? You would kind of think that if you had to be standardized in order to deploy automation, then the number, the percentage of live programs would be pretty low based on that, because 63% are not really standardized or ready for RPA. However, 55% of you are live with RPA. So we've got 31% of you in the kind of the peachy color saying that, yes, you have an active program in place in multiple processes, 13% in single processes, and 11% of you in the green are running pilots and proof of concepts right now. So 55%. And again, we've been tracking this, and we do think that come the end of this year, it's going to be around 58% for the European market and around 62% for the US market. Our sense is that the US market is ever so slightly ahead in their RPA deployment. But this is really telling us that, and we'll debate this, you don't need to have excellent levels of standardization in order to automate. Maybe you do within some automations in order to really optimize them, but in order to get ahead with our various technologies, you don't need excellent levels of standardization. So to come back to the earlier slide where we're talking about how automated is your process today, if you're thinking you need to really standardize first, that might not be a reason. We wanted to find out in what areas are you live with RPA. So just ask those people that are live today. Order to cash is a favorite. Purchase to pay is a favorite. Interestingly, R2R is not such a favorite. It may do because of the profile of the group that we were asking these questions to. Low representation in these areas, again, probably to do with the nature of the group that we've got here. But interesting to see that order to cash and purchase to pay seems to be a ripe kind of ground for RPA deployment. Mistake number 4, too involved in operations. If you're finding that you're only really allowed to do the global process owner role at weekends, at evenings, this is a big job. I was talking to a chap the other day from a huge multinational. Sally was on the call. Sally's in our research team. And he's doing 3 roles. He's the head of global business services, head of transformation, and guess what? He's the global process owner. So it's like these are 3 major roles within an enterprise billion-plus turnover organizations. 30% of the group said that they were too distracted by their own commitment to operations that it affects the success. Of course you are. And again, we've got the breakdown here of who we've got represented in the group. 23% of you are purchase to pay, 27% order to cash, 16% R to R, 17% master data. But this takes me on to this, for those of you just kind of focusing on the purchase to pay segment there, we're dealing with large organizations here. If you look at your scale, 52% of you are global process owners from companies that process more than 500,000 invoices a year. So there is little possibility that you can be good at being involved in the operational part and good at designing what the future of this process should be looking like and making sure that there's project deployment and implementation. These are huge jobs. Now, if you had maybe less than 100,000 invoices per annum, there might be scope for that. You know, you could say, I can wear the two hats because we just don't have the scale. But you look at the figure there, none of you in the room who participated in the survey have less than 100,000 invoices a year. So we have the scale to justify the investment and the focus in having a GPO just focus on design and improvement. So mistake number 5 is not enough budget. This is rather alarming. I'm going to show you the stat in just a moment, but 30% of you said that you would need more budget flexibility, access to budget, maybe your own budget, in order to be effective. And when we asked you, well, what is your budget? 37% of the group said that they actually have no budget whatsoever. What else have we got here? We've got 15% of you saying you've got over $1 million in terms of a budget. So you, again, I mean, companies have slightly different priorities, they have slightly different access to cash, but you look at the probability of success of those that have no access to budget, or maybe the access to budget is you have to go with your kind of your begging bowl to plead for budget. You look at the probability of success for that GPO versus the probability of success for those that have $500,000 to $1 million budget or $1 million plus budget. Let's just go back to slightly different representation. This is a bar chart I showed you earlier, a pie chart. How automated is your process today? 73% of the group said it's only really running at an automation level of 1 to 49% of transactions. How automated do you want to be in 12 months' time? 65% of you want more than 50% of your transactions automated in 12 months. So you can see there the need, the desire to go from less than 50% automated to more than 50% automated is significant. In order to make that happen, it helps if you have access to budget. Mistake number 6. These are all interlinked because maybe there's just somebody in the organization that just doesn't really get the global process owner mandate, vision, purpose. And that somebody, if they got it, maybe could release the funds. 33% said that they could do with more support. There's a lack of executive senior leadership support within the organisation, and more support would definitely help. About 42% of you actually report into the head of GBS or shared services, and 26% of you report into function. Whoever you report into, or whoever are those stakeholders, so much of this role, if you're at the earliest stage of putting global process owner constructs in place, is about education, building awareness, and quite frankly, as many more mature GPOs will tell you in this room, selling the vision and selling the ideal, using the language that resonates with your key stakeholders. So it does resonate, it lands. Mistake number 7 is having a lack of clarity regarding the GPO role. And again, those that have been in place for a number of years, or maybe they've actually been with the company for 5, 10, however many years, there's that communication effort that comes from having length of service within an organisation that will help GPOs communicate to the users, the organisation, as to the relevance of the GPO role. 37% say that more clarity is needed in the organisation regarding the GPO's role and what its purpose is. The key word here, I think, is to avoid being undermined. If your organisation knows what you do, why you do it, what they need to do in connection of what your role is about, It will avoid you and your purpose being undermined. What GPOs do not want to happen is that change happens to their process under their watch without them knowing. And this happens a lot. So again, ensuring that an education and awareness program is out there, making sure everybody realizes what the governance is and what the protocol is around change and around the purpose of the GPO. Organisations that have GPOs in place longer do seem to generally benefit from having that awareness in place. And we've got a mix here. We've got 48% of the group who've been here for 2 years or more in place, and 48% of the group have had GPOs in place for less than 24 months. So the final mistake, number 8. And this is number 8 because it was the largest representation. The majority of you kind of complained about this as a problem, as an issue, that if it could be solved, life could be easier, is not having enough authority. And this is formal authority, maybe a higher up reporting line. Maybe you report straight into the C-suite. Or maybe you are just very explicitly supported by senior management and the leadership team. Formal or informal demonstrations, manifestations of authority. 41% of you say that more formal or informal authority is needed to help with your role. It's a slightly different question about who you report into. We wanted to find out where you sit. And 17% of you sit within finance transformation, 23% in the yellow within the function, and 45% within GBS and shared services. If we look at that breakdown, which group is struggling with authority, depending on where they sit, and is there a connection there? Interestingly, a proportionately higher number of GPOs that actually sit within shared services struggle with authority. I'm not entirely sure why that might be. I have a few assumptions. Sometimes I have heard that those people that report into a GBS lead, they have little or no influence over the heads of business units because they seem to be on the same level, and that seems to be sometimes a problem. But it's worth maybe kind of examining that and just kind of inquiring it and following it through and seeing what the possible resolution is. However, the upside of GPOs reporting into GBS or shared services is the following. I'm stealing a stat from Hackett, who are going to be talking tomorrow. 60% of world-class GBSs, shared services, have GPOs that report into the GBS or shared services leads, and that's versus 30% of the peer group. So 60% of world-class GBSs have the GPOs reporting into them. Okay, so in summary, drivers for change, they're gathering. They're gathering at high speed around us, and I know that a number of speakers are going to be referencing this. The pace of change is only going to get faster and faster. I say in order to keep up, but then it's like, no, come on, let's stay ahead of these demands if we can. GPOs are required to, as much as they can, deploy and mandate those 4 pillars of simplify, eliminate, standardize, automate. Avoiding these 8 mistakes will help you do this.